Welcome back to another episode on the Genealogy TV podcast where we dig into family stories, family history, strategies to help you discover your family history. I'm Connie Knox.
Hey everybody, I'm Ashley Moore joining Miss Connie here today. We are going to explore research techniques and hopefully share some fun stories along the way.
Oh, that's so funny. All right. Well, today we're talking about DNA, and we're going to kind of talk about the thought process that goes through DNA strategies, because it's not, first of all, not just DNA. So good morning, Ashley, for those
Good morning,
who are listening. We're recording this in the morning. So the thinking is, in my mind, when we're thinking about DNA, first of all, we don't want to use DNA alone unless there's probably one scenario. Do you know what that is, Miss Ashley? One situation where you could use DNA alone.
I'm going to take a guess and say that it would be Y DNA testing because of the inheritance from the male line.
Yes, and actually we should have started with the types. So we have Y DNA, autosomal DNA, mitochondrial DNA. We're not even going to talk about X DNA, but you know, my opinion, the one situation would be a parent-child relationship. That is the one time that you don't really have to have records, traditional genealogy to go with the DNA. So, but Y DNA, as you mentioned, is a good point, because you have 100% of the Y DNA. This is for the male line only. Males inherit the Y DNA 100% from their fathers. Therefore, you can trace up the male father's line for hundreds of years. There are tiny little mutations in there, but for the most part, you can do that. Mitochondrial DNA, if you saw the episode on Genealogy TV for Roberta Estes, where she kind of goes through all of the new features over there at Family Tree DNA, which was an eye-opener to me. I was like so soaking it up because I was learning too, because I hadn't even played in that arena in so long, and they've updated all of this information thanks to Roberta Estes and her friends in the science arena. And so, you know, we've got the mitochondrial DNA, but here's the thing about mitochondrial DNA that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
It is I'm sorry?
I'm not as familiar with that type of DNA, so this is really interesting.
Yeah, so it's, you know, a lot of people use it for the mother's line, right? Because mitochondrial DNA is handed down from mother to child.
Mm-hmm.
You notice I didn't say mother to daughter. I said mother to child. It can be handed down to both the male and the female. So, but it stops with the men. So the men don't hand down the mitochondrial DNA to their children. It's only the females. So that's why a lot of times people just assume that it's just the mother's line. But in some certain circumstances, if a guy is looking for his biological mother, mitochondrial DNA might be helpful. There's just certain research strategies that would apply for it. They're kind of rare, but occasionally when, you know, you're trying to find, for example, let's say, you know, any male in the line is looking for the biological mother. The only thing is you have to have that mitochondrial DNA from that man because he's not handing it down. So it stops with him, right? So you got to, you know, if you've got a grandfather who's still alive and he's trying to find his mother, then mitochondrial might be an opportunity to help. I would always advise people to do an autosomal DNA, and I always suggest starting with Ancestry because they have A, the biggest database, but B, you cannot upload DNA to Ancestry, but you can download it and upload it to other platforms. So, you know, it's an interesting process to go through when you're playing in the DNA space. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that, you know, I mean, we kind of briefly talked about the different types, but the autosomal DNA, for those who are brand new to this, is what I call a shotgun blast of the whole family tree. But you only get 50% from your parents. So 50% from mom, 50% from dad. Therefore, you leave behind 50% that you don't inherit. And so when you're thinking about the grandparents, you have about roughly 25% of each of your grandparents, but you don't inherit about 75% of each of your grandparents. So it slowly weeds out as we go up the tree. So when you take a DNA test and you're looking at your matches, what do, Ashley?
So for me, I went ahead and just looked at the breakdown of the report. So I too tested at Ancestry, and they always give estimations. I'm sure anybody who's taken this test, they always see that. They give you a rough estimation of how each of your matches could be related to you. It always turns out to be a rough estimate. I've never seen anything other than like parent that is
Yeah, that
absolute,
is
like,
absolute. Yeah. Or
yeah,
sibling.
correct.
Full-blooded sibling. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, because my half sibling showed up as close family
Yeah.
for them. So I think that there's pretty rare instances where you're going to find an absolute answer. You're going to have to follow some of that information. You're going to have to do some of that uh, traditional genealogy research if you really need to get into it. I love the DNA painter, especially because a lot of my relationships in my family are half relationships. So generationally, they may be estimated further down the line or further up the line from me, just because if, like you said, there's half, half, half. You know, you're always reducing that number and weeding that out, the less you're going to inherit.
Yeah, so just for those who are not familiar with what the DNA painter she's talking about is a different website. It's not Ancestry or Family Tree DNA. It is DNApainter.com. And they have the shared centimorgan tool, which is a fabulous tool where a couple guys, Dr. Blaine Bettinger had collected this data, and then Johnny Pearl put it up on the DNA Painter website where you can get an estimate. Now, one of the things that people need to keep in mind is when you're looking at the centimorgan counts, that's the CM that you're looking at on your DNA match list, and you see that you've got 200 centimorgans, let's say, with another DNA cousin, you can go to DNA Painter. Ancestry does have a tool where you can see what the possible relationships are, but we always like to go to DNA Painter to really visually see it too. There's an overlap. It could be one of 3 or 4 different possibilities. The farther back you go, the more possibilities it is. But it could be, a first cousin once removed, or it could be a second cousin because the centimorgans overlap. And so, yeah. So, Miss Ashley, let's pretend you're looking at your DNA list, and let's pretend you're on Ancestry, and let's pretend that you've already divided it by the maternal and paternal side, which Ancestry now does for you.
Side view.
And you're trying to find an ancestor in a certain branch of your family tree. How are you going to go about filtering out this list? Let's say there's 400 DNA matches in this list. Let's say you're looking on your mother's side. I'm just making this up. But let's say you're looking on your mother's side and you've already narrowed down the whole list to the mother's side of the DNA list. What's the next steps that you're going to take in order to help narrow down the possibilities?
I'm going to sort my matches.
How's that?
I'm going to go through and sort my matches, trying to figure out which branch they belong to. And then through Ancestry, you can actually, I think we use the emoji. I think
I
you've,
use,
or no, you've
you
done,
can do the color grouping.
you can do the color grouping. That's right.
Yes.
So I would then do my best to color group. There are times that I have reached out to folks, some of my cousin matches, and I start with a very gentle and brief message to them, just stating, hey, I noticed we're, roughly third cousins, let's say. I'd like to discuss our possible connection. Would you be up for that? And I kind of leave it at that. If they don't answer, I try my best to find if they have a linked tree, because sometimes you can pull that information without them having to respond to you. There are folks that just don't have trees at all, and sometimes it's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what you're looking for too. So if you're looking for a specific branch of the tree, I would suggest people take the surname and do a search for the surname, because there is a search button in the match list where you can search for the surname.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you have some of those people in your tree, you can try and see if you can find some of those DNA matches with a common ancestor, and there's a little common ancestor button there. Now, kind of a word of caution, when you go to the common ancestor, it's going to take you to a page where it shows you your relationship with this DNA cousin or potential relationship. And if it has a common ancestor, it's going to show that to you on the left-hand side. Now, when you click on that shared, so it's probably an ancestral couple, and so it'll say view relationship. When you click on that, it's going to take you to ThruLines. And this is where the word of caution comes in, because ThruLines is an estimate. It is a hint system. It is giving you a hint as to what
Possibilities
the
are.
possibilities of this tree are. A lot of people, when ThruLines first came out, got so confused. They were like, ThruLines is wrong. These are not my family members and blah, blah, blah. And they got really upset. And so what's happening is ThruLines is using family trees, using your family tree, other people's family tree, and it's trying to line all that up the best it can. Well, if anybody, your family tree or others' family tree is incorrect, then ThruLines has the potential to be incorrect. But a lot of times ThruLines has some great hints, and it will even show you sometimes the path even from people who have private trees. So it's interesting. While it's not going to show you the private tree, it could show you a couple of the people that are in the path as a combination of both public and private trees. So
I've also gone on Find a Grave because sometimes with the memorials, you'll see either information like a transcribed obituary that names relatives so that you can kind of build that out. Or sometimes I've seen where people actually attach others to build a tree and you can see them listed as family members. So if you're kind of working your way back, say if if you're third cousins, you count the G's, right? 1, 2, 3.
great great grandparents are going to be
Great
the
great
common, yeah,
grandparents, great
if we're
great
counting
grandparents.
G's, yes.
So you count the G's, and if you're building back to then build down the descendancy.
Yeah, so I mean, and a lot of times we can use the floating tree as
Yeah.
a tool, right? So if you're trying to figure out your relationship, let's say you're looking at a second cousin and you think, oh, this person's probably in the right place for this mysterious branch that we're trying to resolve. You can put that person in your family tree as a floater. And there's lots of videos on how to do floating trees. But basically what you do is you connect it to anybody and then immediately disconnect them. The trick is to remember who the floaters are, because once you close out that profile, then you got to remember who they are. Well, one of the things that I do is I use the My Tree tags as I create a custom tree tag, and the custom thing is at the top of the My Tree tags. And I will add, so for those who are totally new to Ancestry, you go to the tags are at the top of the screen, if I recall, and you can hit the tag. Oh, it opens up a side panel. You can hit custom tree tag and write floater, and then add that tag to that person. That way, anytime you go back to the tree view of your family tree, you can then search for all the floaters. Now, Ancestry has new networks for those who have the Pro Tools. It's available to Pro Tools right now. They're telling us that you'll be able, the non-Pro Tools subscriber would be able to get networks. Sorry, my brain's dying here. So networks is another way to go and kind of like group your DNA matches into a network. And basically what that's doing is it's adding these people to your tree, but you can't, I don't think at this point you can do it from the DNA match list. No, you can't. I'm looking at it right now, and you cannot add it from the DNA match list, but you could once you identify, okay, this person, let's say I'm working on my Madsen line, my Danish ancestors, and I find some Madsen DNA cousins. I could create a network from one of my Madsen ancestors, create a network saying potential DNA cousins to my great great grandfather, and create this network and manually type these people in as potential network people. It's a little tricky to do that with DNA matches because you have to be kind of careful because these are living people. Now, other people viewing your tree cannot see living people. So there's that protection. So you don't have to worry about that. It's just, and really they can't see your networks either. Networks are absolutely private, only to you. So
Interesting.
they are talking about the potential of being able to share a network with, say, another person you invite, kind of like when you can invite people to your tree. Like I could invite my sister to my tree and I can mark it as allowing people to see living people or not.
Right.
So,
Privacy.
it depends on who you're inviting to your tree as to how much visibility you want them to have and how many rights you want them to have. They can become a contributor, they can be an editor, they can be, just a viewer. But the networks right now, they can't, even if you invite somebody to your tree right now, they cannot see your networks.
Okay.
So, but they're talking about adding that. So we'll see, because that's been one of the requested features is, hey, wouldn't it be great if I could work with my sister on this network? So if she's looking up records and I'm looking up records and we're finding, things together, I don't want to have to be the one to always put in information into the networks.
Great.
Yeah. So the networks can be cool too, because you can attach records to the networks and you can attach images to the networks. So maybe you have a family group photo. I have one of my Danish ancestors where they're all together, and I've identified everybody in the photograph, but maybe I haven't identified all of the descendants. So this photograph that I'm thinking of was taken in the 1950s. So, I have not identified all of the DNA cousins that descend from that photograph. So I could theoretically create a network as I'm starting to build out. It can get complicated, but ThruLines is probably one of your best bets to find those descendants from that ancestral couple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because you got to have a framework to kind of go through, and that honestly gets you pretty far ahead if you can find that the hints through lines, just to kind of point you in the right direction, or at least what you hope is the right direction.
It'd be cool is if you could take these groups that you have, created. Like if we have DNA groups that we've created in the DNA match list, let's say they're the descendants of my Madsen line, my ancestral couple, and I have grouped a bunch of people who I know descend from that Madsen line, but then to be able to attach that group to a network. Wouldn't that be cool?
Really interesting. Yeah, I know. I was listening to one of the podcasts where, was it Nika Smith, I believe?
Probably.
Nika did something that I thought was really, really interesting. She was able to, long story short, take information that she had and put it into a network to build for people who were descended from folks that came over on one of the slave ships. And she was trying to help those folks kind of understand where each of their lines came from based on just an entire ship of these people who had been brought here and getting them to connect to their descendants now. It was really interesting.
From what I understand, she has added thousands of people to some of those networks that she has been working with for the enslaved ancestors. And so that is going to be, I can't wait to see how that pans out, because I know Ancestry is working really closely with her on that too. So yeah, that is very cool. Very cool. I was trying to think if there are any other major tips for DNA. I know the main thing that people need to really remember is that you cannot use DNA alone in most cases. You have to, once you start getting some clues, you kind of have to really do that reasonably exhaustive research to go find the records that match these people to help confirm the relationships, because like we talked about before, you could have multiple different relationships depending on the centimorgan match. And if you have 4 or 5 different possible relationships, once you figure it out, you can actually let Ancestry know what the relationship is to that DNA match in your match list, which is awesome because it helps everybody. It helps Ancestry start to tie these lines together even more efficiently in ThruLines. So yeah, you just kind of have to figure out where those DNA cousins fit. Another thought is don't get overwhelmed by the DNA match list. Use your filters to help group those people together. And I've got several videos on how to group your DNA matches. And not a lot has changed since I created those videos, other than they now have on the little color boxes, there's now a letter that represents the first letter of the name in which you created the group. So for me, I created a group called Madsen-Johnson because that's the ancestral couple. But only the M shows up in this little color box. So, but that's okay, because when you hover over it, it'll pop up and tell you what that line is and how many people you have in that group. But let's talk about missing parentage, as I like to refer to it. So there's this acronym called an NPE. What is NPE, Miss Ashley?
So we've talked about it previously, but it seems that there's a couple of ways this term can be used. In genealogy, I think we use it for anyone that doesn't know about their parent or the identity of their parent, I should say. It stands for non-paternity event, I believe, or non-paternal event.
I've seen it go both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and it doesn't have to be necessarily maybe you don't know who your biological parents, but it could be that you don't know who your great grandfather's father was. And so that is also considered an MPE. I don't particularly care for that term. I think it's confusing. I just like to refer to it as a missing parent of my great grandfather, or, missing father of my great grandfather. I don't know. I just find it a confusing acronym. I don't know. But, there are strategies for that too, depending on how you do that. So let's pretend that if you imagine the fan chart in your head, you got the father's line going up the left side, you got the mother's line going up the right side. So for those, you could use that Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA. But what if you're looking for somebody in the middle of the tree and you're not really finding it through autosomal DNA either? There are strategies that you could use if you can identify. Let's say I'm trying to find my great-grandfather somewhere in the middle of a tree, or great-grandmother, doesn't really matter. I could go and try and find all of the descendants from that ancestral couple and see if I can, narrow down the DNA cousins, and not necessarily just those who have taken a DNA test, but build out the entire tree, going from the ancestral couple down to present day as best you can.
With the traditional genealogical research?
Traditional genealogy. This is
Okay.
why we have to use traditional genealogy in combination with DNA. So you build out that tree, the descendants tree from the ancestral couple, and identify living people who you can ask to take a DNA test. Because not everybody in that descendants line is going to have taken a DNA test. Now, it's proper if you ask someone to take a DNA test to be willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean.
And then you ask them to share the DNA results with you so that you can see how closely related they are to some other DNA cousins, and that will help you start to weed out or have an understanding. Now, a lot of times this comes with conversations with those living people, and they're like, oh, my mom was so-and-so. Okay, well, now I can start to fill out that tree. And as you're starting to work on filling out that tree with the conversations you're having with these people, and Zoom is great for this, by the way, because you can share your tree. I mean, you can or Meetup or whatever the different, online platforms are that you could visually see and share your screen. And they can help you fill in those blanks. And sometimes it may be to the point that you don't need to have a DNA test taken because you actually reached out to them and you talked to them and you got some of the information that you were looking for, and you can start to piece together the puzzle. But sometimes there is a strategy where you can go, you know what, if you could take a DNA test, that would be awesome. I'm willing to pay for it. Test at Ancestry and get that autosomal DNA and see if, you just kind of have to think through what kind of test should they take. Is there a reason they should take a Y-DNA test? Like I got my great uncle to take a Y-DNA test, autosomal DNA test, because he was the only living male. My father had since passed away. He was the only living male who had that Y-DNA. I could have tested his son, but I wanted the higher generation. I wanted the closer generation, especially with autosomal DNA, the higher in the family tree. So get your elders tested first. But, sometimes there's a reason why you want to do that. And it was his DNA that helped me solve so many mysteries. So, I had that missing Davis line. And I mean, I didn't even know the name Davis until he tested, and all 4 of his Y-DNA matches. There was only 4. Today's there's 5, but at the time there was only 4, and all 4 of them had the Davis surname. Davis was not even on my radar when I did that, and that was several years ago. But it was that then, okay, now I've used the Y-DNA. Now let's go back to the autosomal DNA on Ancestry and see if we can find some Davis people in the right place at the right time that could have been the father of this child. People are probably sick of that story, but I mean, it's a powerful combination of tools that we can use when we're using DNA and traditional genealogy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think they're really going hand in hand. I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. I like that, you can look at the DNA technology. Great, it's new, it's very interesting. And then I love that the traditional genealogy, if you're able to, can really support either what you're seeing in your DNA or not.
Yeah.
And that I think is pretty amazing to really see it when it all comes together.
So true. So true. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
I love talking DNA. I could sit there, get me started. I could be talking all day long.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I really enjoy it, especially because it's been so helpful. It's made a huge difference because I honestly don't know what I don't know what I would have done had this technology not come through. Because there were instances where I just had no idea where to go or what to do.
The best part is the technology is evolving so fast. And, aside from DNA, all of this handwriting recognition and AI stuff that is just at lightning speed now, records coming online so fast because of faster technology. It's a very exciting time to be doing genealogy, and especially as compared to what we used to do where we sit in the archives and we would roll that microfilm
The
and
fiche.
our eyes are spinning in the back of our head because we've been looking at not only was
The
it,
card catalog.
you're moving sideways depending on the microfilm reader,
Yeah.
but you're reading down and sliding sideways, reading down and sliding sideways. It was just like, oh my God.
Yeah,
You come
moving
out of
all
there with a
around.
headache sometimes. I could talk about that all day. Anyway, it's been fun since I was a child, so I've been having a good time with it.
Yeah, if you love a good mystery, this is something for you.
And this is one of the reasons why I started the academy, is because we can really work with the students to help understand what they're seeing, and they can ask questions, and we can really kind of take a deeper dive into some of these strategies. So think about the academy if that's an option.
Love it too, because when they submit questions and they're sharing their stories, and it's really, really interesting to see how these strategies can be applied in so many ways. It's really, really, really great. I love it.
Well, the genealogy community as a whole is such a great community because we all learn from each other. I'm learning
Yeah.
from the viewers on the YouTube channel and the folks in the academy as well. Everybody's sharing tips, and so we all learn from each other because there's no way we can all be an expert in every area. So yeah, it's fun. And it's funny because every time I do a new video on the YouTube channel where I've had a guest come in like an expert in a certain area, I'm enthralled because I'm getting this front row seat to learning something new myself about whatever area that they are an expert in. So it's fun. We'll catch you in the next one.
Sounds good. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.